I'm your best friend. I'm Santa Claus.
Cameras installed for absolute safety are transforming into live broadcasts.
I'll leave you and your family alone, or I could do this.
For thousands of paying strangers, turning private sanctuaries into public entertainment. From heavily encrypted baby monitors.
Family is warning others after they say a man hacked into their baby camera monitor and said he was going to kidnap their baby.
He turned that camera on and told us, said turn off the light, and then said, I'm going to kidnap your baby, I'm in your baby's room.
Wake up, little boy, daddy's coming for you.
To locked hotel rooms, the illusion of total privacy is completely shattered. These 12 disturbing true recordings.
What's your name?
Can you come here? I can't hear you. Taking pictures of baby. I'm asleep. No, put me down. Put me down. I have feelings.
Prove that your most private moments are up for grabs, and someone might be watching you right now. Number 12. A single moment in front of a webcam became a cage for one girl. A cage a stranger would keep her trapped inside for the rest of her short life. It began online. A stranger manipulated her, for one moment, into a single compromising image in front of her webcam. That one moment was all he needed. He saved it, and with it he built a prison around her that would last for years. Hiding behind more than 20 different fake accounts, he stalked her relentlessly across every platform she used, sending hundreds of messages. The demand never changed. Do as he said, or the image goes to everyone, friends, family, school. When she refused, he followed through, spreading the picture through her world again and again. Each time she moved, switched schools, tried to start over, he found her and sent it out once more, making sure the shame followed her wherever she went. He didn't do this to her alone. Investigators later tied him to dozens of victims across multiple countries, using the same cruel playbook on each, pretending to be someone else, taking one vulnerable moment, then turning it into a weapon forever. For this one girl, the weight became too much to carry. Before the end, she made a quiet, devastating video, a series of handwritten note cards held up to a camera, telling the story of what had been done to her. Soon after, her life came to a tragic end. Years later, the man responsible was finally identified, extradited, and convicted, with a judge describing the pleasure he had taken in her growing distress. This is where the watching leads, when no one steps in. Not just fear, but a girl pushed out of her own life by a stranger and a lens. That is why every camera deserves a second look. Every password deserves to be changed. And story like this deserves to be remembered. If anything here feels close to home, please reach out to someone, a trusted person, or a local support line. No image, threat, and stranger behind a screen is ever worth a life. Number 11. 1,600 people locked their hotel room doors, exhaled in private, and were live-streamed around the clock to thousands of paying strangers. Everything in this video so far involved cameras people chose to install. This is different and far more frightening because the victims never agreed to be filmed at all. They simply walked into a room and shut the door behind them. In a sprawling operation, a group planted tiny spy cameras inside the rooms of motels across 10 different cities, 42 rooms in 30 separate establishments. The cameras were almost impossible to spot. Their lenses measured a single millimeter across, hidden inside everyday objects no guest would ever think to question. A hairdryer holder on the wall, an the digital box beneath the television. To anyone checking in, the room looked completely normal. Roughly 1,600 guests were secretly filmed, and the footage wasn't merely stored away. It was live-streamed 24 hours a day to a paying website with more than 4,000 members. Nearly 100 of them paid a premium monthly fee for extra features, including the ability to replay and rewind specific streams to go back and watch particular people again. Strangers, scattered around the world, paying for a front row seat to the private moments of people who believed they were utterly alone. It was reportedly the first time authorities there had caught a ring broadcasting victims live rather than merely recording them. A few people were arrested, but there is no recall on what was streamed, no way to gather it back. 1,600 locked doors. Not one of them was ever truly closed. Number 10. For weeks, a little boy insisted the phone in his room talk to him at night, and everyone assumed it was just a child's imagination. He was 3 years old, and he kept telling his parents he was scared to sleep because something kept speaking to him in the dark. To exhausted parents, it sounded like a bad dream, a story, the sort of thing small children invent. There was no reason to suspect the device in his room had become something to fear. Then one night, the mother walked past his door and heard it for herself. A stranger's voice drifting out of the baby monitor, speaking softly into a sleeping child's room. The words belonged in a nightmare. "Wake up, little boy. Daddy's looking for you." What happened next is the image that refuses to leave anyone who hears it. As the mother stepped into the room, the camera moved. The night vision lens physically rotated, turning away from the child and swiveling toward her, tracking her across the room like an eye-following movement. And the voice narrated it out loud. "Look, someone's coming into view." There was no way to know how long it had been happening. Days, weeks, long enough for a child to start dreading bedtime without the words to explain why. The monitor was meant to let parents keep one protective eye on their son while he slept. Instead, it handed that eye to a stranger one who could watch, speak, and follow them around a room they believed was theirs alone. Number 9. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, a family's own security camera calmly informed them that nuclear missiles were inbound and they had 3 hours to live. It sat on top of the television, the kind of device installed for peace of mind and then forgotten about. Then, with no warning, it began to speak. It announced that intercontinental ballistic missiles had been launched, that the country had retaliated against Pyongyang, that 3 American cities were targets, and anyone in the affected areas had roughly 3 hours to evacuate. The voice was loud, confident, and by every account sounded completely real. For a few minutes, that family believed the world was ending. The mother described it as 5 minutes of pure terror, and the 8-year-old son, hearing that missiles were coming, did the only thing a terrified child can do. He crawled under a rug and hid, as if the floor could shield him from a nuclear strike. It was a hoax. There were no missiles. A stranger had slipped into the camera using passwords leaked from some unrelated website and decided that staging the apocalypse in a stranger's living room was a good way to spend an afternoon. Here is the quietly disturbing part. Before that day, the family hadn't even realized the camera had a speaker built in. They never knew it could talk, which means they never imagined it could listen or watch. And while a panicked family debated whether to flee an imaginary war, the person who pressed the button was almost certainly on the other end of that lens, watching the fear unfold in real time, savoring every second of a terror engineered for nothing but amusement. Number 8. For the price of a cup of coffee, complete strangers were buying live access to the inside of other people's homes. An investigation by a surveillance industry watchdog uncovered something that reads like dystopian fiction. Hackers had broken into vast numbers of internet-connected home cameras and were openly selling access to the live feeds on a popular messaging app in plain sight across at least 7 public channels, some with thousands of subscribers each. The price to peer into a stranger's home was as little as $3 to $6. These weren't anonymous mystery feeds either. The listings came with descriptions, catalogs, essentially detailing what kind of home each camera looked into, who lived there, which rooms were visible. Even when people tended to appear on screen, family homes, private bedrooms, salons, locker rooms, medical offices. Some feeds came bundled with stored archives stretching back weeks, so a buyer could scroll through a stranger's past as easily as their present. The watchdog described it as the first known case of home surveillance cameras being systematically exploited as a commercial enterprise and actual marketplace built on other people's private lives. The implications are staggering. The cameras involved were ordinary, mass-produced models sitting in countless ordinary homes. The vulnerability wasn't exotic, and because the access was sold so cheaply and so openly, the person watching any given family on any given night might not be one obsessed stalker, but a rotating cast of paying customers, strangers who clicked, paid pocket change, dropped into a living room for a while, then moved on to the next listing. Investigators alerted federal authorities, and the channels were eventually shut down. But the model had already been proven. A home camera was no longer just a security device. To the right buyer, it had quietly become a product, and the family living in front of it, the merchandise. Number 7. A single leaked password handed strangers a live window into 150,000 cameras inside hospitals, jails, schools, and psychiatric wards. A technology company sold cloud-connected security cameras to hospitals, prisons, schools, clinics, factories, and major corporations across the country, institutions that trusted those cameras to guard their most sensitive spaces. Then, a group of hackers got in. Not through some brilliant exploit. They found administrator credentials sitting exposed on the internet, typed them in, and walked straight through the front door. What waited behind that door was staggering. Live access to roughly 150,000 cameras, and not just the live feeds, but the complete archives. Footage from inside psychiatric hospitals, women's health clinics, intensive care units where patients lay at their most vulnerable, jail cells, where cameras tucked inside vents and thermostats tracked inmates using facial recognition, police interview rooms, capturing exchanges between officers and suspects in crystal clear, high definition, schools full of children, a major car maker's factory floor. For about 36 hours, this group could roam through all of it, tens of thousands of supposedly secure spaces, viewable from a single screen, with the ability to rewind through everything already recorded. Some cameras used facial recognition to identify and categorize the very people they were, and the intruders held root access, the deepest level of control, meaning they didn't merely watch the cameras, they effectively owned them. Number 6. A father stood outside his baby's nursery and heard a grown man's voice already inside, talking to his 7-month-old son.
I was shocked to hear a deep, manly voice talking to my 7-month-old son.
It was an ordinary evening when he paused at the door. At first, he assumed it was a glitch, some crossed signal on the monitor, but the voice wasn't trapped in the nursery. The home was filled with internet-connected cameras, and as the parents moved downstairs, the voice followed them from room to room, now turning on the adults, hurling obscenities and slurs through the speakers. It wasn't lost or confused. It knew exactly which camera the parents were standing in front of, and it spoke. The intruder watched, reacted, and taunted, pointing out that the father was staring back at the lens, mocking him for it. A live back and forth inside a family's own home with someone who had no business being there in any sense of the word. Then came the detail that pushed this from creepy into genuinely menacing. The house had grown uncomfortably. The smart thermostat upstairs had been cranked to 90 degrees. The same stranger controlling the cameras had reached over and turned up the heat on a sleeping infant simply because he could. That is the part that lingers. A voice in the dark is frightening, but twisting a dial to make a baby's room dangerously hot is something else entirely. It is the moment a faceless watcher stops merely looking and physically reaches into the home. And the way in was almost insultingly simple. The cameras all ran through a single account secured with a recycled password. One reused login was all it took to hand a stranger the run of the house, a voice in every room, and a hand on the thermostat over a child's crib. Number 5. He didn't just watch his victims through their own cameras, he listened through their microphones, learned their secrets, and used every word against them. A man operating under a sinister online handle infected more than 100 computers, reaching over 230 victims, at least 44 of them children. His method was depressingly simple. Malware disguised as songs and videos, passed around on file-sharing networks, quietly handing him total control of every machine it touched. Once inside, he didn't stop at the webcam. He read the emails, listened through the microphones. He combed through hard drives hunting for private, intimate photos. Then he turned all of it into a weapon. He would contact victims with the material he'd stolen and demand more explicit videos, or money, sometimes thousands of dollars in a single day, threatening to send the existing images to every friend and family member if anyone refused or went to the police. In some cases, he posed as a victim's own boyfriend to trick her into producing new images, never realizing the person on the other end was the very predator blackmailing her. When one victim made the mistake of confiding in a friend about the threats, the response was instant and brutal. He posted nude photos of her on her own social media page, making good on the promise to show the world exactly what happens to anyone who doesn't comply. The damage reached far beyond the screen. One woman was so shattered, she refused to leave her dorm room for a week. Tormented further, when he taunted her with details from conversations he'd overheard through her own laptop's microphone. He knew things he had no possible way of knowing. He made certain she understood that he knew. A judge eventually named it for what it was: a form of cyber terrorism, psychological warfare waged from a bedroom against people whose only mistake was clicking the wrong file. The prison sentence ran for years. The fear he planted ran far, far longer. Number 4. A loving little detail painted on a nursery wall became the exact thing a stranger used to terrorize a sleeping child. In a toddler's bedroom sat a baby monitor, its camera pointed at a crib where a girl slept. Above the bed, spelled out in cheerful letters, was her name. It was meant to be sweet. It would end up being the detail that made everything unbearable. One ordinary evening, a voice came through the monitor, not a parent's, but a man's. And it wasn't babbling into the dark. It was speaking directly to the child, by name. "Wake up, Allison," it said.
He said, "Wake up, Allison, you little."
Wrapped in language no parent ever wants near their sleeping toddler. When the parents rushed in, the voice turned on them too, taunting and insulting them. Fully aware, it now had a bigger audience. The intruder had been quietly sitting inside that nursery, electronically, watching a baby sleep, and decided the entertaining thing to do was wake her with cruelty. There is one detail in this story that is deeply disturbing. The girl had been born deaf and used cochlear implants, which were switched off while she slept. So as a stranger poured filth into her room, she heard none of it. She slept right through the whole ordeal. Her parents heard every single word. The monitor was connected to the home's wireless internet, and that connection was the open door. The manufacturer later pushed out a security update and stronger passwords, but no update can unring a bell. The family unplugged the device for good. As the father put it, it felt exactly like someone had broken into the house. Except no window was smashed and no lock was forced. The intruder simply strolled in through a camera meant to keep their daughter safe. Number 3. Months before she was crowned a national beauty queen, a stranger emailed her private images taken inside her own bedroom, and she had no idea anyone had been watching. She on the path to a crown, with years of pageants behind her and a title weeks away. Then, an email arrived that turned a dream into a nightmare. Attached were photos of her, captured through her own webcam in her own bedroom, without the faintest hint that anyone was there. The demand was the now familiar poison of sextortion.
Miss Teen USA 2013 Cassidy Wolf is involved in a scandal that she says has rocked her to the core.
Send more revealing images, perform on a video call, or these go public. And that modeling dream becomes something far uglier. She did the brave thing. She refused, told her mother immediately, and went to the police. Investigators traced the crime and uncovered a chilling scope. The person behind it had targeted somewhere between 100 and 150 young women, their ages spanning from the mid-teens upward, scattered across multiple countries. He had used notorious malware to seize control of their computers entirely. Cameras, keystrokes, files, all of it. Then came the detail that makes this one personal. The predator wasn't a faceless stranger across an ocean. He had gone to the same high school. He had walked the same hallways and graduated the same year. While she was building a public life, a former classmate had been sitting quietly behind her own webcam, watching, collecting, waiting to strike. When it was finally over and he had been caught, Her reaction was its own kind of remarkable. Rather than only rage, she expressed a strange grief that someone her own age had thrown away his entire future to terrorize girls without ever grasping the damage he was doing. She turned the experience outward, becoming a public voice warning others. Because the lesson buried in her story is the one nobody wants to hear. The watcher is sometimes someone already known, someone who once sat a few seats away. Number 2. 2 words from a stranger turned an ordinary movie night into something that crossed an entire ocean. A young bartender and her boyfriend had spent a normal evening in. The next day brought a Facebook message from an account no one recognized, using a disturbing close-up of the Joker as its profile picture. The message was almost cheerful, really cute couple. Attached to it were photographs of the night before, taken from the webcam of a laptop that had been sitting open in the room with them. It didn't stop at the camera. The account's privacy settings only allowed messages from approved friends, so the stranger had simply added himself as a friend seconds before sending it, walking through a locked door and knocking on the way in. A trace placed the account thousands of miles away, in Cairo, Egypt, belonging to a group with a name that left nothing to the imagination: spammers and hackers. The police were contacted, and their response was nearly as chilling as the crime itself. There weren't enough resources to chase it. The advice was to block the account and hope the silence held. Experts later explained the part that should unsettle everyone. Slipping into a stranger's webcam isn't some elite skill reserved for masterminds. It takes basic knowledge and bad intentions, and little else. Somewhere on the other side of the planet, a person had watched a private evening unfold through a laptop, reached across the world, and made sure the couple knew they'd been seen. Then, he vanished back into a world of thousands of other unsuspecting victims, and the case went cold. No name. Just 2 words that never quite stop echoing. Number 1. The most disturbing discovery isn't that one predator watches strangers through their webcams, it's that thousands of them do it together, and they have a word for the people they spy on. An investigation pulled back the curtain on a thriving online world of people who use remote access tools to seize control of strangers' computers. They don't call their targets victims, they call them slaves. They gather on public forums, page after page deep, swapping techniques, comparing collections, and trading captured webcam footage of people who have no idea they're being watched. The tone is what curdles the blood. Not menace amusement. They treat invading a stranger's most private moments like a hobby, a game, a bit of fun between friends. One boasted of archiving 200 gigabytes of secret webcam material, sorting the footage by category and picking out the good parts. Another complained his current batch of victims was boring and wished he could get more with webcams, because spying is so much more exciting when there's a live person on the other side. Even when a target noticed the webcam light flicker and reached forward to slap a piece of tape over the lens, the reaction in these forums was laughter. Getting in requires almost no skill. The tools do the work. A single trick to download a fake game, an infected song, and the target's machine appears in a control panel alongside hundreds of others, each one a real human being. Their location and screen and camera listed neatly like items in a collection. They are out there right now, and there are a great many of them. Which of these was the one that made the skin crawl? Drop it in the comments. And for more deep dives into the things hiding in plain sight, subscribe and turn on the bell.